I had everything to do with what is happening in Cholocho. You want to debate with me? What is it that I did for the country? Go to Cholocho. And that's why I joined to sit with them. And while I was there, I did not think, oh my God, what a wonderful place it is to be around this table. We challenged them. Even on this issue, Gugurahundi, that we are talking about, I'm the only one who has produced a Gugurahundi bill in 2006. It's still on the table. They ran away from it. If they are serious, they should not go around meeting some fake organizations like the so-called Matebeleland Collective, when in fact there is a proper foundation for addressing this problem. And yet they want to whitewash and pretend that they are not aware of the background. We sat with them in order to change them, in order to change their culture. That's why they call us, some of us, certainly not even some of us, as if I'm talking about the collective, me. Why did they spend all their time saying CIO and so forth? Why did they not allow me? I'm talking to them now and they are listening to me. Why did they not allow me to attend even a single joke meeting? Why did they deny me security clearance? Some of us were in that government as strangers. But if you go into that government on the basis of your professional strength, without a guru, you must always be strong. You must always appear with a lot of confidence, because that's the only foundation. Others had their gurus, where they will go there, refer to them and so forth. But some of us, there's a reason. You know, people want to say, hey, when we tell them this is the military that took over in 2017, they want to come back and say, but the military did not start taking over things in 2017 and so forth. You were with them before that and so. Wow. Do you know anything about the security cluster in Zimbabwe? Do you know anything about what the security cluster is and who are the members of the security cluster? Who do you think that cabinet members are equal in Zimbabwe? Do you think every cabinet minister has access to classified information in Zimbabwe? No. That's why we're challenging these guys right to the last minute, and then they say, "Oh no, you know, you only challenge them because you are now out and you are not eating with them." No, we challenged them when we were eating there. That is why they came out with their guns blazing well before November. If it was about accommodating, you don't go to school so that you can't understand which direction the wind is blowing. When I presented the Blue Ocean documentary to the ZANU-PF Politburo in July 2017, the wind was blowing in a very clear direction. If the idea was just to play it safe so that you keep your cabinet car, it was to see where the wind is blowing and shut up. We don't go to school for nothing, but we spoke and stood against the wind. That's why they came to our houses and used semi-automatic weapons, grenades, and explosives against civilian houses. We could have stopped that. We knew that. So I'm really sometimes, and the way you asked me, provoked that something in me to say, I think sometimes we just get tired of people who project their own prejudices and limitations on you, whose limited understanding of politics is imposed on you, and then they burden you with their own lack of understanding and think that you must be the only one who develops an ideology and a policy paradigm based on your personal circumstances. But that your personal circumstances should define your politics. Hell no. Mandela was, we learned something from our leaders. We learned something from Nyerere. We learned something from Mandela. We learned something from Joshua Nkomo. And of course, we learned something from President Mugabe, whose first anniversary of his passing on we are remembering today. And one thing, regardless of what you think about them, and they are not perfect, none of them is perfect. The one thing is that their personal circumstances did not define their politics.
Okay,
personal circumstances are not the basis for going into the public arena. That is one overarching principle we should learn from our founding fathers and mothers.
Absolutely. So it's good that in a way I provoked you. I actually got to know a lot of things I didn't know. Why you were in government, how it was for you. It was not as easy as people assume. People assume that you were there enjoying your life. You were just there eating with the leaders, yet you were actually there for your constituency and also for your national duty, which was twice Minister of Information and then Minister of Education. So I want to ask about those national offices for you. How was it for you? Is there anything that like you could have done better than when you were Minister of Information or Minister of Education, higher and tertiary?
No, again, my dear friend, you are asking me this question, and I've been asked umpteenth times, zillion times. And I'm always asked this question by people who think it's just a game of trapping each other, that no, what you did was bad. Now, every question there is a framework. I know this.
I know about
how can you ask me? How can you whether there's anything I could have done better?
Professor, there's nobody who's 100% perfect.
No. I said the same. I have even said the same. But we must confront the issues for what they are. As far as I'm concerned, Jose, in my humble opinion, and I stand corrected if I'm wrong in this assumption, we can only talk about something that I could have done better if we have talked about what I did. And when we talk about what I did, and where we don't talk about what I did, if what I did is the reference point. But for me, partly out of my education, partly out of my experience, it's odd to be asked what I could have done better without a reference point. Because the reference point is actually what did we do? What was important that we had identified we needed to do, and we did it A, B, C, D. Okay, we can see that. Do you feel that you could have done either this one that you have already described better, or could you have done something? For me, to be asked from the blues, what could you have done better? Well, but I say this honestly, from the bottom of my heart, with the greatest respect. I find it a conversation in the dark. I can't be asked what could I have done better without a conversation about what we did. And for me, you know, when I was at the University of Zimbabwe, I used to teach undergraduates and graduate students, including doctoral students, public policy. And every student of public policy knows that you can always do things better. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you can always do things more. If you are doing them right, you could do more of the right thing. But that, therefore, a discussion of public policy must be informed by the specific policy interventions, who was doing them, why they were doing them, who benefited from them, and who lost from them. Because it goes without saying that every public policy intervention has beneficiaries and losers. That is inherent in the nature of public policy. Now, to make a very strong, in fact, you are asking me what could you have done. I want to say this to you, just that in my first engagement in public policy, we found ourselves against the background of where the country was in 2000, having to make limited interventions that were responding to the situation we found on the ground. And the predominant focus in that regard was, number one, to come up with a public campaign to support and promote and defend the historic land reform program, and to do it in a non-violent way, because at the time, the intervention that was gripping both society, the region, and the world was that there are violent land invasions in Zimbabwe. So we came up with what is popularly, but usually wrongly, labeled as the Hondo Yominda campaign. And that it was important for people to understand that this is the third Chimurenga. It is a fulfillment of a fundamental grievance of the land reform program, and it has to be done. And that was what the liberation struggle was for. To remind ourselves, because this was happening 20 years after independence, and to explain that it was not a coincidence that the peasants and the war veterans were at the forefront of this. They are the ones, the peasants in particular, who bore the brunt of the consequences, the negative consequences, the life and death consequences of the liberation struggle. And they made those sacrifices because they wanted the land to be returned back. So it was important to do that. And if you look at what we did between 2000, July 2000 and February 2005, it was around that. Secondly, because there are only two things. Second, and let us be clear, in doing that, in disseminating that, there were all sorts of points of resistance. There were all sorts of areas of contestation, some agreements, some disagreements, and so forth, through the media writ large, not the media as journalism, but the media as journalism, arts, and culture. It was a total package. And that's why we had galas and all those things. And that is also why we had local content, that it has to be the voices of Zimbabwe. But we also were faced right from the word go with the fact that the major platforms for public communication had collapsed. In particular, broadcasting, but not only broadcasting, but the print media in public, in terms of the Zimbabwe Mass Media Trust, had also collapsed, and Zim Papers was up for sale. Some crooks had put Zim Papers in cabinet as a target for privatization. When it was a trust, they were treating Zim Papers as a public enterprise or a parastatal, when there had been no single cent that the government of Zimbabwe had put to acquire Zim Papers from its previous South African owners. That was in front of us. The least we could do immediately at that time was to stop that nonsense and to say Zim Papers is a trust that was set up through a donation of $5 million from the Nigerian government to the people of Zimbabwe, not the government of Zimbabwe, but the people of Zimbabwe, and to benefit all the people of Zimbabwe. So it was very difficult. It was a cabinet process, but we had to quickly stop that on the one hand. On the other hand, we had a ZBC that had been cannibalized by people like Mnangagwa. He makes a lot of noise, that fellow, but he's a thief who stole from ZBC. They cannibalized it, selling it had all sorts of properties, the Zimbabwe Broadcasting Corporation. So on the one hand, it had been left to a shell, no assets, ZBC. A series of ZBC CEOs had personalized it together with some ZANU-PF gurus and turned it into a patronage institution, employing their small houses employing their nephews and uncles, employing all sorts of people who did not know anything about broadcasting except to expect a paycheck at the end of the month. There were many of them. And the wage bill was huge because of these Hamane Shamwari who were employed. They had turned a broadcasting institution into an employment organization, and it was crumbling. And because for the better part of the 20 years, it had one inherited debt from the Rhodesian days in Forex, and two, it had acquired all sorts of programs, including these UEFA, the Premier League, and all these, which don't come for free, which you must pay for. Anyone who is in broadcasting knows the principle that content is king. And content is king because that's what you sell. Yes. If you are buying from foreigners, you must pay for it in Forex. ZBC had a huge Forex debt. And those companies abroad who were owed this money had engaged lawyers. Honey and Blackenberg and so forth, very good lawyer companies, who had attached every available piece of asset for ZBC by the year 2000. And ZBC had run out of content. And if you remember, if we remember on TV, they were broadcasting for only 19 hours. And for the better part of the 19 hours, they would just switch on to CNN. And in those days, CNN was connecting to public broadcasters as a way of growing its brand. And they were happy to find a public broadcaster who says, hook me in. They don't do that anymore. But they did that, and it helped to create audiences for them. And they would just switch on there, go home, drink beer, and so forth. And it was terrible. So we had to deal with that problem. And the last problem is that no one else in the country wanted to hear something called the ZBC, or Zimbabwe Broadcasting Corporation. They were calling it ZBC. And we had to realize that apart from these other problems that I've outlined, and there's greater detail to them, if you want a technical presentation on those, we are happy to be my guest. But the brand had died. And I know that there are some of my friends who said, oh, but Radio 3 was powerful and so forth. Not in 2000. It had collapsed. Radio 2 was big and so forth. Not 2000. They had cannibalized these stations. This equipment had been cannibalized and sold, and marketing was no longer a corporate function. It was individuals lining up their pockets at Radio 2 and Radio 3, all the radio stations, and Radio 4 was not functioning at all. We had to rebrand. And the first thing we wanted to get rid of was something called ZBC, because it represented something awful, something unprofessional, something personalized, something that belonged to them being just a group and not everyone. So we decided that because it was such an awful empire, big, and they'd narrowed the decision making, that you had chefs at ZBC working with some ZANU-PF gurus whom you could name, and they were just treating it among themselves. And for example, some people say to me, oh, you got rid of Joy TV. Well, they personalized the damn thing. A few individuals had turned ZBC into a licensing authority and licensed somebody. And yet their enabling act did not allow them to sublet a channel. The channel belonged to the people of Zimbabwe. It did not belong, it was a public channel and not a private. Channel 2 could not be, in terms of the law, privatized to anybody. Channel 2 needed to be made available to the nation so that other producers and so forth can come content. So we had to do that. So what did we do to make a long story short? We had to unbundle ZBC. We unbundled. We came up with a corporate strategy of unbundling ZBC. And the unbundling of ZBC was necessary not only from a corporate business point of view, but from a political point of view, because by unbundling it, we wanted to decentralize it. We wanted to devolve it. We wanted to take it away from Harare and make it a national broadcasting entity with the presence outside Harare. In 2000, it was crumbling, and yet it was an all Harare thing. We did not want to come up with a political strategy and politically say, hey, look, we are here to destroy ZBC. We want to get rid of ZBC and what, because they were going to react. So in order to minimize their negative reaction, we engaged experts and said, help us with a corporate strategy of unbundling ZBC in order to bring it closer to all the communities so that the communities can access them, not only in terms of getting information, but also in terms of producing content that can then be put on the platform. And unbundling was not our invention. Unbundling is a tried and tested corporate strategy. And so we said, let us retire ZBC and create Zimbabwe Broadcasting Holdings, ZBH, and come up with a number of appropriate broadcasting units, content units, which will be based in various places across the country, some in Harare. And that is why, and we realized that one of the most contentious political centers for ZBC was news. And we were tired of ZBC news. Something called ZBC news is just deadly, poisonous. People didn't want their to hear of something called ZBC. So we wanted to get rid of it. And we got rid of it to create something called Newsnet. And we wanted the Newsnet to be a professional thing. And to force that situation to make them professional, we said it must be self-sustaining. It must gather, disseminate news on the basis of what the market can support, not what government can support. And we said, you are on your own. But we also created Sportsnet, we created KidsNet, and we had sorry?
Sportsnet.
Yes, there was Sportsnet, KidsNet, Newsnet, and there was on-air systems to deal with the technical, and then there were 3 others. I think altogether there was something like 7 units. But also, we said these stations, radio stations and the television stations, must be unbundled from this big monster called ZBC. So we said there's ZTV, the ZBC channels. We said there's ZTV, let it be in Harare as ZTV and be a standalone business unit. In fact, we said let it be a company with its own board and own management, this ZBC thing. And the second channel, we said it should not belong to any individual, that the public broadcaster cannot lease out and be an arrangement between 1 or 2 bosses and a businessman out there. It's a public channel, let it be used by the public. And we sent it to Bulawayo, to Montrose, and said there should be national TV broadcasting from Bulawayo to all of Zimbabwe using channel 2, which had been leased out to Joy TV. And we took it there. And it's the one which produced Makorokoza and all these things, because its main content was coming from Amakos Theatre and from a number of independent producers there. And we wanted national TV as a public television station to compete with ZTV in content production. But we wanted to make sure that these platforms too are not both in Harare. We wanted one to be in Bulawayo and the other to be in Harare. And we thought by doing so, we have spread out a national platform to access not only information dissemination, but critically content production. Then the radio stations, we said Radio 3, which became Power FM, should move away from Harare and be in Gweru and the center of the country, and be a standalone and be a station for young people to promote the production of content, which is music for the young generation based in Gweru, and to produce this content in a manner that will be appealing to the young people of ages 4 years old to 35. And we hear some people saying, hey, there was all this music. There wasn't. There was some barbed wire, this and that music. But the music that we're catering for 4-year-olds to 35-year-olds coming from Zimbabwe by Zimbabweans, which would ultimately be available to regional, continental, and global audiences. It was simply not there. Simply not there. We would need a completely different discussion to have this. We are happy to have this discussion. We've never had it in public. But understand, we wanted Power FM to be Zimbabwean based. And we told the gurus who had created Radio 3 that, listen, tell us why you created Radio 3. They said we created Radio 3 in order to get Zimbabweans not to listen to Radio 5, Bob, and all those stations that were broadcasting Billboard Top 100 type of music, because our young people are listening to those stations, and when they listen to those stations, they stay to listen to propaganda against us coming from South Africa. And even during the broadcast of this Billboard Top 100, there's propaganda that you have a socialist, one party state, whatever. So we want to play the music that Radio 5 and Pop and whatever are playing, so that those guys, which was nonsensical actually, because there's more to these choices than that. But those gurus, Joseph, we told them that, you see, because you did that, you have cranked up huge bills for foreign content at ZBC. And the bills are in Forex, and ZBC can't pay. The guys you sent at ZBC have cannibalized the station. They've lined up their pockets, but the station is broke, and their vehicles are being impounded all over the place. And the license fees are no longer being paid. They had come to zero collection. People were refusing to pay license fees. And we told them that in order to start raising money and in order to start getting people to pay their licenses, you must do what every broadcaster around the world has done. The tried and tested formula is that content is king. And the subset of that principle is that local content is lekker. If you produce local content where the people will start hearing themselves, seeing themselves, and having community activities around that content, they will start paying for the fees, and we will reduce the bill, if not eliminate it, at least in terms of new generation, and then find ways of settling the ZBC debt, because the lawyers were not relenting. They wanted the Forex paid for their foreign clients. We were talking to the Ministry of Finance, they were refusing to pay. We were talking to the Reserve Bank, they were refusing to pay. They were saying these parastatals must be self-sufficient. So we're the problem. So when we told these bosses that we want to change power to Radio 3 from 75% minimum Forex based content to 25% Forex based content and 75% local content and the implications of that, they agreed. And they didn't think we had a sinister political objective. They could understand the political and cultural framework as well as the business. We told them that the people want to watch UEFA Premier, but it can come for free, and we cannot afford it. We're even failing to broadcast live games involving the Warriors. It was a headache to get to that because they didn't understand where CAF will not let you broadcast those things for free, especially if you have not qualified. And you know that it took than a miracle for the Warriors to qualify for the CAF finals, for example. And so if you are not in the qualifying set, you pay an arm and a leg for the right to the match. But even if you qualify, you still have to pay. And they then understood. And then we kept Radio Zimbabwe in Harare. So you had in Harare Radio Zimbabwe and ZTV1, and also we transformed Radio 4 into national TV and said all the major languages that are spoken in Zimbabwe, which are now in the constitution, must have a platform that broadcasts in these languages 24 hours a day. This business that Radio 4 is only for education is a joke, is a lie. It has not assisted anybody. Let us turn this whole platform and make it available for our compatriots who speak these other languages 24 hours a day, so that they can also be part of the national articulation, representation platform. And we keep it in Harare. And then, as I said, TV2 went to Bulawayo. And that was what we sought to do. It's an untold story. It was about promoting Zimbabweans. I have been profoundly touched by the recent production of the Chamembe story, because the producers of Chamembe, who came on the back of the pioneering work of Delani Makalima in the urban groves, just did amazing stuff for Zimbabwe. Amazing stuff. And I have been profoundly touched that in their own words, they are telling this story undisturbed by prejudices, based on what they actually went through, what it meant, what potential it had, and in the logic of your question, what they could have done differently or better. It's something I've been listening. I had actually missed it, and somebody brought it to my attention on my Twitter timeline, and I've been watching this, the Rockies, and I've just been saying, God, if we had been committed and not politicized people, because none of them, like the Chamembe guys, went to their studios or so, and I see people complaining sometimes, hey, about a tax offer and so forth. Look, I'm a teacher. I believe I'm a teacher, and my politics is informed by the fact that I'm a lecturer and I am a political scientist professionally. I sat behind the desk and spent long hours to study the field. And I understand that in human interaction, nothing works better than demonstrating its potential. Nothing is better communicated than through doing. It's better to talk about what you know than what you assume or think. So when we're telling them that, telling young people that we need you to produce and to do this and the music like this, and really in the end, we hope you can produce music that is Pan-African, Afro-pop, that will be on Channel O and the press and so forth. We also wanted to get together the best of Zimbabwean musicians to put this music and produce it at the level that others are doing. And Pax Afro was an experiment to do that. We were let down by the fact that in order to come up with good music, not only do you need a good song, well written song, you also need a good producer for that song. You need good, excellent performers in terms of the music instruments and the vocals for that song. And critically, a problem that is yet unresolved in Zimbabwe. You need that music when it is these elements I've just outlined to be recorded in the appropriate or with the appropriate recording instruments, the appropriate studio. The entire Chamembe experience and all these other wonderful things that our pioneering young people have done, that music was recorded in backyard studios, in bedrooms. It was not recorded with the best of digital instruments, but even if you have the best of digital instruments, any musician will tell you that when it comes to the guitar and the vocal, nothing beats the real instrument. You cannot record the voice using digital equipment and the cut guide. So we had to. This is what we sought to do with the unling. Unfortunately, we succeeded. When I left government in February 2004, the people who were alarmed that we had thrown ZBC in the dustbin, come up with ZBH Holdings, devolved and decentralized the various units across Zimbabwean communities to enable everyone to participate and be heard, and embarked on upgrading of the transmission network in the country. The moment I left, they started one by one reversing everything until they brought back ZBC. But we had eliminated the animal. They brought it back. They killed national TV in Bulawayo and said we will broadcast in Harare. Killed Power FM in Harare, in Gweru, and said we will broadcast in Harare. Everything came back to Harare, and all of a sudden, Harare became Zimbabwe, and Zimbabwe became Harare once again. Fundamentally wrong. That's why when I returned to the Ministry of Information, again, I brought accountants to try and unbundle the damn thing again. Although this time we were now also working on giving the Zimbabwe Mass Media Trust the content it deserved, as well as the personnel. We were now in 2013, I brought to Zim papers all along in the first service there. I just dealt with what I found there. And it was difficult to touch anyone at Zim papers, Herald and Sunday Mail in particular.
Why was it difficult?
Because they were appointed by their political gurus, and some of them were appointed by the CIO. The CIO has a desk at the Herald there. They sift through everything. I used to love reading stories that stuff would be sent to us to edit and so forth. No, the guys are in there. They run Zimbabwe as a state entity, not as a public trust that is there for all the people of Zimbabwe and whose beneficiaries are all the people of Zimbabwe. But this time, because I had come back and the president had said, hey, mnomziva Moyo kaadzoka, mnoziva mabasa ake, and so forth. And I thought, well, inga papa takanetsana mukati, hey, ane musoro wakaoma sedamba, and so forth. Saka takuregererana. And in any case, makati mime amuna kundidzinga, ndakazvidzinga ndega, nekuda kuva member of parliament ari independent, and I did that because mangamari funga kuti makangwara mukati you have ZANU-PF is reserving Cholocho for a woman. Manyika akavhaira akati, kana Jonathan achida kumirira Cholocho, he will have to be a woman. And I won't have to be a woman. I will remain being independent. And I defeated them. And there are people who don't understand. No, that hottest contest Nagamira against ZANU-PF MDC and Yangairi constituency MDC. ZANU-PF had never won Cholocho. In fact, the only time that ZANU-PF had gotten Cholocho was when I returned it in 2013. And of course, when they brought the army in 2017, they used their gun to get Cholocho. Otherwise, Yangairi MDC. And the MDC did not support my candidacy in 2005. They were united. I ran against them. I got 11.5 thousand votes thereabout. The MDC got 6,000 votes and thereabout. And ZANU-PF 4, the woman candidate, the one I was told, I must be like, hey, Agabuda 4. But after that, it was like, yes, comrade, in parliament, what. And then when I came back, when the president reappointed me in 2013, I felt that I'd shaken off some of the nonsense I'd faced in the first wave. I really had a hard that time because I was not seen as ZANU-PF. It was always CIA this, CIA that. If it's not CIA, how come he worked for Ford Foundation? Ford Foundation is the CIA and so forth. And the comrades were behaving as if I had appointed myself minister. CIA, I don't know. But it was just difficult to work in that party politically. And it was always important to be on top of the situation professionally. And these guys who think we were there to issue press statements and so forth, all the analysis I've seen about me from the public and the discussions is about this one press statement, one day, one press statement. Iowa, we were spending 23, 22 hours a day in office and we were not writing press statements. We were working very hard. So Ndagazoka thinking I have a bit of leverage. And then I said, number one, if we fought with each other in the first phase, let us find each other. We are polarized. Our biggest focus is going to be depolarization. And I said, for us to succeed in that depolarization, to find each other against the background of the success of the GNU, you guys in the media, you be at the forefront of identifying the issues, the problems, and providing the solutions. In I'm going to find funding for you to do that. And then we set up IMPI. And the IMPI process was led by the independent journalists, largely. They were the majority. And the IMPI report is a superb, excellent report. Vana tomorrow, one was Mangwana, Vana Mangwana, Nana Monica, have used the IMPI report to come up with half-baked draft legislation that they've come up with to replace IPA and the Media Information Commission, and to come up with freedom of information, all this nonsense. These laws they've come up with fall far short of the recommendations that the media sector made in the IMPI report. Far. They are talking nonsense that they've done media reforms. And we were going to implement that full throttle. And I sit here proud that we are the ones who engineered the IMPI process. It was led by the media, the majority of which came from the private sector, and they were honest to the calling of their profession. And we accepted their recommendations in 2015. And just before I was to implement those, I was booted out of the Ministry of Information. But before setting up the IMPI, I appointed and brought for the first time from the independent media an editor of the Sunday Mail, Edmund Kudzai, whom I did not know before. I only got to know. I did know prior in the engagement. He was introduced to me by ZANU-PF people, Xavier Kasukweli. And I was impressed by the young man's knowledge, capacity, technical capacity, and appointed him to be the editor of the Sunday Mail. I had worked on and off with him. Dudu was a reporter of the Daily News, and he used to give me hell. He would report all sorts of things. One of the stories that made my life so difficult, which Dudu did as a cadet reporter of the Daily News, was to write that I had given, there was a by-election in Bulawayo, and we gave some checks to various communities that in the ward that was having the by-election. Dudu wrote a story that all the checks I gave to those groups bounced, and it was hell, you know, and it was not true. You know, some ZANU-PF guy who didn't want me, a Politburo member, told him this, that oh, those checks have, and Dudu, you know. And then the most memorable encounter I had with him was when I was appointed Minister of Information, and before any public encounter, Zimbabwe was playing the Warriors. They were playing at Baba Fields, and Leo Mugabe and Vincent Pamire were failing to find any cabinet minister or ZANU-PF person who was willing to be the guest of honor, because there were red cards everywhere and whistles from the MDC. It was showing red cards to ZANU-PF and out. And they didn't want to go. I knew Vincent Pamire very well, and I was getting to know Leo Mugabe. Vincent told Leo that, you know, call that guy, he will agree, you know, and so forth. Are you sure? Yes. So I went there to be the guest of honor at that game. And as they were announcing, the guest of honor, Minister of Information, Minister of State for Information and Publicity in the office of the President, oh, they went wild in jeering me. Oh, boo, boo, boo. I tried to listen this way, boo, that way, boo, everywhere, boo, boo. I just said, okay, look, you know, I'm not a politician, but in politics. So I just walked there as if nothing had happened. Hello, guys and girls. And they were just looking at me, the players, like, oh, are you for real? And I said, hello, yes, hello, hello, good luck. Then when we finished, Mdudu came to me with his, tape, you know, the tape recorder. Minister, what do you think about that jeering? And I told him, I did not hear any jeering. I heard cheering everywhere. And that's how I got to know Mdudu. He went on, when he set up that new Zimbabwe.com, presented me as Goebbels and so forth. And then in my engagement, I just found that the young man who had started straight from high school into the media, when he went to the UK and came back, he had developed amazing qualities, amazing investigative qualities, and even more amazing writing skills. And so I appointed him to be the editor of the Chronicle from the and Kudzai at the Sunday Mail. And then I'd always known in my days as the Minister of Information in the first wave that among the best journalists the country had was Joram Nyati, and I got to know him when he was with the Zimbabwe Independent as I think a deputy editor or something like that. And then I encountered him during JOMIC, when I was a member of JOMIC, not in government, but coming from ZANU-PF during the GNU. And he was the spokesperson and the information officer of JOMIC. And JOMIC had come to an end in 2013. And I appointed Joram Nyati as deputy editor of the Herald, coming from the private media for the first time. And this is happening at the same time as these guys are coming in. Also from JOMIC, I'd worked with Wendy Nyakurero. I think she's Matinde now, Mrs. Matinde, and she's the editor of the Manica Post. But I assistant editor of the Sunday Mail, coming from the private sector, not coming from the public. And you all know, one, when this happened, the ZANU-PF gurus reacted with anger, led by Mrs. Mujuru, then working with Ditmas Mtasa and Bonyongwe. And they said I was subversive. I had brought to the public media members of the MDC. I'd never known these guys MDC members. Maybe they would have had their own MDC associations, but I knew them as terrifically skilled journalists. And for the first time, I'd done something which I had not done in 2000 to 2005, which is bring to the public media excellent skills. And they were doing wonderful jobs. I mean, the Chronicle changed, the Sunday Mail was beautiful, the Herald was doing very well with Joram Nyati. Joram Nyati ended up being the editor of the Herald, the first Ndebele guy to edit the Herald, which was quite remarkable. And then the CIO did a report with two things to end this story. One, that Jonathan Moyo has brought in subversive elements to edit the public media in order to orchestrate change or destroy ZANU-PF from within. Two, he has sent these media people, largely independent media people, across the country to gather information in order to subvert the government, and they've produced an IMPI report. So the IMPI process and report was recorded by the intelligence people as CIA work, sponsored by the CIA, spearheaded by Jonathan Moyo. And when President Mugabe brought it to fire me, he called me to fire me, and the two things he put before me to dismiss me from government. And that was after he had announced to the public at Nathan Shamyarida's funeral that, all along, he was praising Shamyarida. Great guy, media this, he did this. Unlike this Jonathan Moyo, who has brought all these people in the public media. We thought we were together. Meanwhile, we don't know that he is doing these things, bringing these people to divide people. And he's the devil incarnate. I'm the only one whom my boss publicly called the devil incarnate or something of that nature. I know more senior people before me, like Joshua Nkomo, were called snakes and so forth. Me, I was called the devil incarnate. And after he called me the devil incarnate, he then summoned me to his office in July 2015 to fire me. And the meeting was at 6 p.m. And he was going to fire me in the presence of the Minister of Intelligence, Ditmas Mtasa, and the Director General of the CIO, Bonyongwe. Happy to know Bonyongwe. And what he laid to me with these guys, and they'd been sitting, they kept me waiting outside before they called me in, the three of them. And when they'd finalized how they were going to deal with me, I was called in. And the president was, number one, you've come up with impi. And then I was pleased to hear that, because it told me that there are nincompoops around the president. And I confronted Ditmas Mtasa and Bonyongwe. You know, if you are going to call the impi thing a subversive document to remove. And then I had to explain live to him to say, what is the impi thing? Then he said, but what was worse is that without my authority, you brought these people to Zim papers, the editors that I have named. And then on that one, Bonyongwe and Ditmas Mtasa intervened, because my defense was, but these people, first of all, it's Zim papers, it's not a parastatal, and I thought the process of appointing editors is different. We come to you to get the authority or approval for appointing board members, but the editors must be appointed by the board, and they were appointed by the board in terms of the deed of trust. And they said, since when? Then Bonyongwe intervened and said, then I said, I met this one in Jomik, these two in Jomik, the other one whom they were really incensed. President Mugabe was about the appointment of Edmund Kudzai as the editor of the Sunday Mail, because Mtasa and Bonyongwe had come up with a phony report that he was Baba Jukwa, when in fact he had held the system to unmask Mamajo. They turned the tables down because they had created Baba Jukwa.
Also, Baba Jukwa was created.
Yes, Baba Jukwa was the CIO character.
Okay.
Was created by the CIO. And they were was created by the CIO to undermine Mugabe. If you watch this documentary, which has just been made public, or will put on YouTube over the last 24 hours by Roy, the Ghanaian guy who produced it, called Mugabe, Villain or Hero. If you watch carefully, it's an important documentary. That one, it's long, almost 2 hours, but I urge people to watch it. It is a lot of snippets, which are gems of snippets that lead to new stories and so forth. I'm not going to say many what they are, because people should do their own research and so forth. But one of the things you find there is that the system, this guy did this documentary between 2000 and 2009. That's a long time ago. But already, because he spent 3 years interacting with the system and high-level people, he figured out that there was pressure from Mugabe's succession. He doesn't say who was putting the pressure, but it, except in one instance, it says from ZANU-PF big wigs and the military. But there definitely was pressure, and the untold story, which researchers and investigative reporters need to get into, what that was. Because when the Zimbabwean state is a securocratic state, and when securocrats put pressure on a politician, they harm citizens. They do harm to citizens because they want the politician to be blamed. They do serious harm. And somebody needs to tell this story. And this is why, apart from really requiring researchers and the investigative reporters, the Zimbabwean situation will not be told to a level where we can really move forward as a nation until there is a serious judicial process. The process must be judicial.
So, Professor, that was actually going to be my next question as we wrap up this live chat today, that 14 November 2017, you found yourself in a very difficult situation. I don't know, you touched on it a little bit when you were talking about your father earlier on. You had to undisclosed location as we speak, but the situation in Zimbabwe today is terrible, is painful. My question is, what was Mnangagwa like? Is it something that you saw in him, President Mnangagwa, that he was capable of doing what he was doing, or all this came as a surprise to you? And also, what can be done now to move Zimbabwe forward?
Well, it is common cause that in July of 2017, I presented a comprehensive documentary on why Mnangagwa was unsuitable and qualified to be president, but it was more on what he was doing, the extrajudicial and illegal criminal things that they were engaged in order to grab power. Mnangagwa has always been a security person. Mnangagwa has never been a statesman in his. He has been a person who believes less, if at all, in politics and more in violence. He embedded and ingratiated himself with the Rhodesian security apparatus right from the beginning, and the South African security, the apartheid South African apparatus right from the beginning. He worked with those people, those were his network, the bedrock, and British intelligence. He did not work with communities. He did not care about human life. He has always claimed that he is opposed to the death penalty because he faced it, not because he understands the sanctity of human life, the importance of human life. His career is about blood spilling from day one. And then during the first 10 years of independence, because he was the Minister of Security, and because the CIO was at the forefront of enforcing the state of emergency, the Rhodesian state of emergency, and because that enforcement involved the Rhodesians themselves, who were still there in the system, carried over from the independent days, instead of cleansing Zimbabwe's security apparatus of Rhodesian influences, of Rhodesian personnel, Rhodesian culture, he entrenched it. And the fact that a political brigade in the form of the 5th Brigade take over from one brigade for people in Matabeleland in order, it became an opportunity to perfect the instruments of violence, coercion. When people would be freed by the courts, he was the one who would send them into jail, stay for indefinite periods, and so forth. He's a security man. He has defined himself not even as a security man, as a man who knows nothing about humility. When he was asked after the coup, what have you learned now that you're in this office? He said, the one thing I've learned is to be humble. You don't need to learn to be humble. Your mother and father should teach you that from birth. From that first cry, you must learn humility, because humility is a critical human quality for every human being, but more so for the political ones who want to be leaders, who want to be president, and so forth. Him, no. When I presented that documentary and exposed him, he was so angry with me that right there in the Politburo, seated next to President Mugabe, in the presence of Politburo members, he said to me, during the days in Mozambique, people like you, I separate them in sorrow from their necks. And he said to me, the White House is really treasonous. We just have to find a way for the security to deal with this. When I was visited by all things, it was not surprising, but that threat was not enough for me to say, I withdraw this threat. Chef Warren, a lot of people have not understood. They pretend, one of the things that frustrates me about politics in Zimbabwe is that people who were not there, people who were not witnesses to an event, want to pontificate as if they were there. I hear a lot of people not only talking like in two respects that have to do with Mnangagwa. People want to say to me, why do you blame him for Gugraundi, but you don't blame Mugabe? It's Mugabe, it's him, and so forth. And they speak as if they were there the day my father was killed. They speak as if they are witnesses who know who killed my father. They want me to go for political accountability when I'm looking for judicial accountability, when I'm looking for the guy who pulled the trigger, so that that guy should say who sent him, when I'm looking for the people who are commanding the operations, so that they're brought to justice, and it's them who must say who sent them. I, as a victim or a survivor or an affected person who lost a father, along with other people who lost other relatives, are not the ones who should sit in judgment saying, we want what happened there and let the consequences and let the chips fall. If you look at Mnangagwa, you will find him right there. There are reports of himself pulling the trigger, himself ordering an army truck to pull a guy to show what should happen to a individual. Pull him by the time the guy arrives there. Not only the meat is gone, but the bones too. There's just the string. He was involved there. This is Mnangagwa as a security person, as a military man. Now, people must appreciate. We will always demand that there be judicial process, and people think, oh, you're demanding and asking after November 2017. No. We have been making this demand. They know very well. The process of demanding things when you are inside is different from what you use when you are outside. It's dangerous to make demands of social justice when you are inside using the tactics of an outsider. Equally, it is hopeless when you are outside to use the tactics of an insider to demand for justice. This is the fact of life.
But one day, now that you are outside, there are issues that you talked about, cabinet meetings, all these things. Now that you are outside.
Yeah, but you can talk about them inside. When you are inside, you talk about them differently.
Yes.
When you are outside, you also talk about one of the things that I personally, I am grateful right now. And I know that the system is spending sleepless nights and so forth. There are a lot of people, including many in the system, who are unhappy in Zimbabwe today. And those who are inside, who can't say things that are happening right now, they are finding various creative ways of getting the information to reach outsiders like me. It stands to reason. When it was difficult on Twitter for people to send DM, less of the information was coming. Twitter has now made it easier that even if you've closed your DM, they let you know that there are these people who are sending things. Do you accept? If you accept, you accept. And the people, we can say all sorts of things about how useless the social media is, and a lot has been said, but it is increasingly becoming useful. The diaspora that pays for the government by supporting its people in Zimbabwe, but is unable to participate in the political process on the ground, is increasingly participating through the social media effectively. And they have relatives there, and some of those relatives get encouraged to say, this has happened to me, that has happened to somebody what I know, but I don't know how to get this out. And then somebody, it could be somebody in the diaspora, would say to that relative who may be a civil servant, wamboedza kutumira DM kuna Jonathan Moyo here. Ukamtumira Jonathan Moyo, he will say. And if I get the DM saying the truth is this and this, I will obviously not go and say, oh, the truth is this and this.
Yeah, you also.
I then take the information and subject it to verification and so forth. And if I find that it is solid, I don't hesitate to put it there. Dynamic that is developing in the system, which we did not have before, but which being enabled, one, by the fact that people have had enough. People have never, who are there, who in the past would keep the info to themselves or would not know what to do with the information. But now they can throw it there and then it finds the expression. And I think this is why also people are getting nervous and afraid. But the response, this whole thing about abductions, Mnangagwa, as I wanted to say, or conclude what I had said earlier, that he has never been about ideology or policy or about any community, not even Kwekwe, not even Chirumanzu. Chirumanzu is only about that obnoxious mansion, which is just put there in the middle. Everyone else is just living like it used to be in the Munumtapa days. There's no change there. He's about himself, his family, his cronies, people like Kuda Tagwire, his relatives, Edwin Manikai's friends, Herbert Nkala, John Shan, Douglas Munati. He's about his son, Emerson Mnangagwa Jr. He's about his wife, Auxilia Mnangagwa. He is about his small houses. It is a moral disaster that we have a president who has women and children all over the place. Women and children are a factor in Mnangagwa's life. But while it's a personal matter, and none of our Zimbabweans who must be respected and they are protected by the Constitution, and every human being matters, and all human beings are equal, regardless of their situation, relationships, and so forth. There is the point that these relationships have messed up Mnangagwa's sense of morality or lack of morality. He does not have the common decency that is required for a person holding that position. He has the moral decency of a mafia. And that is, no country deserves that. He's a security man who ordinarily moral issues would worry nobody. If you are out there and you are former there. But if you are that and you are occupying the highest office in the country, the one that must be the custodian, not only of the law, but also of the values and the morality, public morality, then there's a problem. But that problem is to be found in his associations. His associations are problematic, and they are not problematic from today or yesterday. They have been problematic from day one. And don't tell me to be president in 2004 in Cholocho. No, he's the one who set up the Cholocho thing. And the Cholocho thing had been exactly what he had done at Ntalale High School the week before or 2 weeks before, which he had done and presided over. And the reason why I was there is because the Gaules and Ndebeles who were running Cholocho and the Mdendas who were running Mat North wanted it to happen. But it was a security operation. And the guy was critical planning it and organizing it, a late general. It was an army thing. These Lavashes and so forth were driving that thing using General Chingomde. He's always been that. But you know, when you are in there, you don't like stay away and so forth. When your people put a pressure, me, I didn't want to go, but eventually, because much north was the Mnangagwa province and the district coordinating committee, DCC of Cholocho, that was run by Gaule, was the Mnangagwa one that bought these things and set up. You then must also maneuver. And for me, we said, all right, I'm going to be there. I will assist you guys. Never participated in speaking. This was the Mnangagwa's people. But what is in it for us? And because the presidency, not the president, was being debated, we said we will support this as long as it incorporates the principle of regionalization for the presidency. And meaning for the president, for the number one office.
Mm-hmm.
That if you agree that all tribes will have a chance and we meant the major one, and we can then somehow work this out to a practical, enforceable agreement, then that's to do the articles that I wrote in the Zimbabwe Independent at the time, where we but my view, because we're talking about it now, is that this man is a security military man. That is what the Cholocho thing was about. That is what the 2008 was about, the Chirangano Chavo, and that is what the coup was about. To grab power by a secrocratic conspiracy, a political military political military complex, or a politicized securocratic arrangement for grabbing power. And what is important about this, there was no agenda for the people. It was not about the people. It was not about any constituency, any community. It was a group in order to have the same thing. Violence with impunity. The same people regrouping, the Gukuraundis and the Mashurugwis coming together, bound together by violence, instrument of violence, abducting people, enforcing disappearances, and torturing people, murdering people. You've got to understand that since independence, there is no abduction and the murder of citizen or a person in Zimbabwe that has not been resolved by the criminal justice system, except those that have been carried out by Mnangagwa's syndicate. As Zimbabwe's capacity to resolve crime, no crime of the nature that involves an enforced disappearance, an abduction, and a murder. No such thing has happened in Zimbabwe. Just check the criminal record, which has not been resolved unless it has been carried out by this Guguraundi cohort that I am talking about. And Mnangagwa has been involved in all of them. In all of them. And the only way you can get to the bottom of them, and there is no Director General of CIO, no Commander of Defense Intelligence, and Defense Intelligence being the MID, no Commander of the Zimbabwe National Army, and no Police Commissioner General is not aware of any abduction and forced disappearance or a murder of citizens. Any saving things have happened. And these guys are the ones who must be held accountable. They know. Some of them will not say outside the judicial process because they must protect themselves. They will be eliminated. But there is not, you want to know what happened to Nkala. You know, what is his name? Nkala.
And he tried Zamara also.
Yeah. What is that Nkala? Because you know the Nkala I'm talking about?
No.
The one, anyway, right from the Rashwe Gujar.
Rashwe Gujar, yes.
To Itai Zamara.
Mm-hmm.
There is, and then to what's happening now, several now. There is no serving Director General of the CIO, no serving Commander of Defense Intelligence, and no serving Commissioner General of Police who can claim ignorance of what has happened to these people. It's impossible because these disappearances are joint operations, especially by the CIO and the military intelligence. And it's very important that these people should be held to account because you are not going to have a new Zimbabwe, a different Zimbabwe, until this chapter is closed. There has to be full disclosure right from those days. It's actually from Guguraundi. It doesn't start with Rashwe Busha. There are many people to this day who disappeared during the Guguraundi atrocities, who were abducted, tortured, and killed, for whom disclosures have not been made. But for Zimbabwe to close that chapter, which chapter has been perpetrated by the same people, and for which information must be available under the conditions of a judicial process, not a lynch mob, not a finger-pointing exercise, and not a Zimbabwean judicial process. The Zimbabwean judicial has been compromised. It has supported, it's afraid of the guys with the guns. It has acquiesced riot around and over them. We need, if not a regional process under the auspices of SADC, and if not an African Union process, because these bodies were compromised by whining and by embracing and accepting a coup in blatant violation of the Constitution. Maybe we need a UN process, but we definitely need an international process. There is no way under the sun Zimbabweans on their own will be able to get to the bottom of this matter. It is impossible. And yet, it is necessary. We will not turn the page because atrocities have been committed with impunity. They shoot people in broad daylight on the 1st of August, right there in the CBD of Harare. Not Kuswini in Tolo, Monde Valley, or in Mzarabani, but right there in Harare, they shoot and kill people and refuse to take it. And then after shooting and killing people in broad daylight, an international, well, not quite international, but let's call it international, but something they set up something which is led by a very respected former president of South Africa, Halema Mhlante, and they come up with findings that these 6 people were killed from the guns of the army or police because only the army and police had that capacity on that day. And then they say, you pinpoint exactly who pulled what trigger against what victim. 35 of these were injured critically, but 6 of these were killed. Investigate and hold accountable. To this day, there's nothing. Now, if they are prepared not to come clean about something they did in broad daylight, Who thinks that they are going to come clean about the abductions? They use funny cars with funny numbers, and now we know through the Tawanda Mcheiwa's case that they even use some car rental companies and so forth, and sometimes make a mistake and not change the numbers and so forth. But people who refuse to accept responsibility and correct their atrocity, correct the crimes that were committed in broad daylight and for which the resources have been used, and a commission of inquiry with international participants has taken place involving some of the lawyers who are supposed to be among the best human rights activists like Love Momadoko. If they can do that and get away with it and say, no, hey, this and this, honestly, let us be serious about it.
So, Professor, in your own opinion, what must be done now as we conclude? What must be done about Zimbabwe?
I just said what must be done. I said you need a judicial process that is international to get to the bottom of all the atrocities, abductions, enforced disappearances, torture, and of individuals, and the mass murder of 20,000 people from 1980 to today. All of them. And you need that to be a judicial, and it has to be, we need to do this. If we don't do it, we'll never find peace. The living relatives, friends, and communities affected by this will never find peace. We will always continue to point fingers at each other. We will always be moved by mob justice and so forth, and yet not necessarily to be vindictive. This is not a case for vindictive justice. It is a case for truth, social justice, and reconciliation. There will never be in any community reconciliation without truth. There will never, no community has ever reconciled without truth. And that's why we are opposed to what Mnangagwa is trying to do in Matebeleland with these so-called fake people who describe themselves as the Matebeleland Collective. They don't represent anyone. Jesse Williams, or what is it? Jenny Williams represents nobody in Matebeleland and has never represented anybody. And we will not allow her to make a backroom deal with Mnangagwa over the Guguraun regarding how to handle the issue of remand. The fundamental question of truth must come first. It will not come first through all these meetings that Virginia Mabiza is organizing to please Mnangagwa. No, it will come first through a transparent, internationally superintended judicial process. We don't want jungle justice against anyone, but we do want the truth. We do want people to come forward. If it means giving them amnesty for telling the truth, let it be. But it is what has haunted this country. And the fact that they continue to do it without the proper legal consequences is what must worry it. It's what must worry us. It's what must worry the country, the community, SADC, the African Union, and the international community. That they did it yesterday and got away with it, they are doing it today, they will do it tomorrow. That's what worries us. We need to bring that chapter to an end, and only a truth and justice process that is fair to everyone involved, which is not a finger-pointing exercise, and which is the appropriate legal warranties, is what Zimbabwe needs. And Zimbabwe is the only country in Southern Africa, if not the continent, which has this unique problem that goes back to 1980. and that is still continuing. Finally, I just want to say to you, to just demonstrate how serious this issue is that as a former ZANU-PF member and former, people can say whatever nonsense they want. I'm done with the ZANU-PF myself. But I know that there are very good people in ZANU-PF. And when I say ZANU-PF must go, I don't mean these people must go, and I don't mean that these people's rights must go. I am very alive to the fact that the 2013 Constitution is clear that we must recognize and respect the worth of every individual, every person as a person, the worth of every person. And also that we must respect the equality of all human beings, and that all human beings, in terms of our constitution, are entitled to their full rights as enshrined in our Bill of Rights. But this thing that is called ZANU-PF has become inextricably intertwined and associated with all and every atrocity that has been committed in our country. It's the values that have become associated with it, and the fact that all humanly possible attempts to exercise this thing called ZANU-PF of this association to this moment have failed. The UNITA Code was intended to do that, and that's why Joshua Nkomo became part of it. It's failed. And Mnangagwa, for one, is hostile to the UNITA Code. He never talks about unity. He will tell you about flashing out apples, but he will never talk about unity as something that is fundamental to our country. It's not important. We also know that in the context of what has happened since 2000, against the backdrop of the movement for democracy or movement for democratic change in terms of the party that has championed that movement for democracy, the GNU should have brought that to an end, the questions around that. And the people of Zimbabwe, in terms of the global political agreement, they were promised that one. With all the contestations, which are okay, because the society is really a bundle of contests. But they came together, signed the GPA, and one of the promises of Mugabe was a new constitution, which was a clarion call since 1999. And that new constitution has all the values that should bind us as Zimbabweans. The government is not putting a cent to make people know what those values that bind us are. Civil society is not making noise around those things. And worse, it has failed. The gains that the society made under the GNU through the GPA, and more importantly, through the new constitution, are disappearing under Mnangagwa. First, the coup should not have happened against the backdrop of the new constitution. It's very clear what the role of the military should be. We had a bench, a constitutional court under Chief Justice Malava, coming up with a fictitious interpretation of Section 212, which put the army above the constitution and created a fiction that the army is the guardian of the constitution and that it has the right to intervene to save the constitution. In the streets, that people will say that's BS. The guardians of the constitution of Zimbabwe are people, not any institution. All institutions in terms of the constitution are creations of the people. All authority resides with the people. But yet a bench, because of his political relationship with Mnangagwa, there are days in Kwekwe or Masvingo or heaven knows wherever, and these dealings, coming up with an astonishing principle that the military, the Zimbabwe Defense Forces, are the guardians of the constitution, and they can come and invoke whatever nonsense they want And if they want to say it's Operation Restore Legacy, they will say that and take over everything and take over the streets and take over the public offices and take over the public institutions like ZEC, let alone the courts themselves. This can't be 40 years after independence. The attempts that have been done so far to change things. First, the big one, big society, Unita Code failed. GPAGNU failed. We have the coup. And lastly, I am not the one who should tell you about how much goodwill Mnangagwa and his lot enjoyed after November 2017 from Zimbabweans, from the region, from the African Union, and from the international community. They enjoyed more goodwill, and we could even qualitatively say better goodwill than the GNU between 2009 and 2013. We should not look for the services of a rocket scientist to understand why they have squandered that goodwill. And they must not look for bad apples to blame for squandering that goodwill. The is open for business, the door has been shut. Zimbabwe is open for violence. August 1, 2018, violence. January 14 to 28, 29. Abduction since January 14, 2019 to today. And they are amending the constitution that was taken instead of fully implementing it. Instead of being honest to keep the promise they made to the people of Zimbabwe, they are amending it. And the amendments are intended to take away the power and authority which the constitution had given to the people and give it to Mnangagwa, give it to the executive. The interpretation that they have of Zimbabwe is worse than the one that existed during Mugabe. So if you can squander the goodwill, if you can use this, but they say, oh, we have brought respect, like especially SB Moyo. He must understand that people are not fools. He also must understand that his colleagues, the foreign ministers, are not fools. You can't tell them that this new dispensation has introduced more freedoms in Zimbabwe than before. No, it's worse. There are more people over the last period who have been charged of undermining the authority of the president than were charged during Mugabe's 38 years. More over the last three years. There are no freedoms. They have cynically taken advantage of COVID-19 to introduce a state of emergency and take away people's freedom. They've manipulated the courts such that people who didn't argue their case during the election immediately after regarding the parliamentary seats, which all cleared by the electoral court, the only court that should decide who represents who won what election is the electoral court with respect to MPs and the constitutional court with respect to the presidential election. But they have used the Supreme Court. They've used the Supreme Court to reverse and undo the results of the parliamentary election. Shamelessly. You now have Thokozani wanting to go back to parliament as an elected honorable member, and yet she's dishonorable, a product of a dishonorable process, patent dishonorable, broad daylight. We need not look far. It's because you have people who are in power fully knowing that the authority they are exercising is not based on the consent of the people. If they knew that the authority they are discharging is based on the people, they will be respectful of the people at best. At worst, they will be afraid of the people. But no, they are not. And hence, the rest is history.
So, Professor, if you are to meet President Mnangagwa today, what advice would you give him?
I cannot give him advice. He's beyond advice. His own people have complained he doesn't take advice from the ZANU-PF or Politburo. They are always sitting in wonder, and he just got to Tagwire to refurbish their offices and give them 4x4s. So they have 4x4s and offices with carpets. Whenever you listen to Obed Mpofu in particular, and Patrick Chinamasa speaking, one thing that immediately hits you is their ignorance of what's happening. They don't know what is happening. They are no better than you and me. Mthuli Ncube and George Guvamatanga and Kuda Tagwire, Mnangagwa, and SB Moyo make decisions that have nothing to do with these people. They are the ones who are supposed to advise Mnangagwa, because they are supposed to be the political guys who are living in the community. The same with MPs. Ordinarily, they are supposed to have a caucus, and that caucus is the one that should advise the Mnangagwa based on what they hear from the constituencies, because they are formally the majority party. But we know that ZANU-PF MPs have been reduced to know. We know that ZANU-PF Central Committee bodies, there is a clique that is not based on the political process. Now, we also know that when he realized that he doesn't have capacity in his cabinet, but more particularly, he realized that they want to create a system of making decisions to take advantage of forex, of resources, minerals, platinum, gold, and so forth. He created an advisory, what is it called? That advisory council of his, it has a name, you know, what the hell is that name? You know, the one that Manika is chairing right now. PAC. You know, it's PAC, somewhere, you know, Presidential Advisory Council, I think.
Advisory Council.
Yeah, PAC. You know, that PAC was supposed to undermine cabinet, but it was supposed to advise him. And then the people who were in it to advise him immediately realized that no, it's just a thieving committee to advise him on what to steal, from who to steal it, and so forth. And it died a natural death. It is not advising. Now, Joseph, you can't ask me, a stranger to all this, to say, what will I advise him when the guy doesn't take advice from all these structures, including the ones that he has created, you know? I have no advice for him. Just to, instead of advice to him, I'll simply tell him that the people have had enough. Do the right thing. You have so many children all over the place. The majority of them are young. Society will know that they are your children. Forget about yourself. You have done enough. Think about your children. For God's sake, think about your children. Do what is right for them. And I would then extend that advice to his busybody children, like Sean, like Collins, and especially Emerson Jr. You have a bright future, young man, but look at what happened to Gaddafi's son. Don't invite it to you. Think about your society. Think about the next person. Your father is not immortal. Do the right thing for your neighbor. Be your brother's keeper. You said this is a new dispensation. There's no philosophy or ideology underlying that new dispensation. Many, if not all Zimbabweans, were ready to have a new Zimbabwe after Mugabe. And they wanted it, they were entitled to it. And there is no normal Zimbabwean whether in ZANU-PF or in MDC or across our society, who wanted a continuation of the so-called First Republic. However you want to describe the 38, 39 years. No Zimbabwean, no sane Zimbabwean wanted that. And the reason they supported this is precisely because of the rhetoric that Mnangagwa said when he was going on with the voice of the people is the voice of God. Where, there are many people who've been sharing these days all those things. I want to establish a society and work together beyond party boundaries. Did Zimbabweans know that when you said he wanted to create that kind of a platform beyond party boundaries, he meant that you will create an Ian Smith-like Poland, an association of sellouts, a treacherous, blatantly treacherous. People didn't know. People thought that you will respect the way that the Zimbabweans are exercising their freedom of association. If they are choosing to associate with the MDC Alliance and they are calling that association MDC Alliance, and if that association has evolved or mutated from something that was MDCT, that's what they are choosing to do because it's a natural right. And don't subject that to a fake court process and come up with a fake Supreme Court judgment and say the rule of law suddenly says the guy who lost yesterday is the guy who has won today. How can Mnangagwa think that Zimbabwean, or think rather, that Zimbabweans are so stupid as to accept the nonsense that all those MPs who were sitting in parliament as MDC and were listed in the Hansard as MDC Alliance and in the roster as well as where they were contributing. And everybody recognized them as MDC Alliance. Suddenly, because of the Supreme Court and a judgment and an interpretation of that judgment, the MDC Alliance has vanished from Parliament. And that MDC Alliance was controlling about 28 out of 32 councils, urban councils, suddenly doesn't control those. Suddenly, the 28 councils must, by interpretation of this, be controlled by Thokozani Kupe or Monzora. Suddenly, all those senators and members of the National Assembly are now members of Toko, and Toko herself is going into parliament. And we are supposed to be serious as a country. And the voters who are very clear about what they are doing are supposed to be from God. And God is Mnangagwa, and his angel Peter is Kudata Gwire, who has used money to pay Toko, pay Monzora, and corrupt other people, many other people in the process. And we are supposed to accept that. You don't, and no one needs to like, love, or support Nelson Chamisa to know that he actually won the presidential election in 2018. We don't have to like the MDC Alliance and its MPs. They don't have to be our friends. We don't have to agree with them ideologically to understand that it is outrageous to recall them from parliament and replace them with Toko's people who lost, or to force those who want to remain to denounce their party, the MDCA Alliance, and their president, Nelson Chamisa, and say their president is Toko. The spokesperson of Toko was boasting the other day, 2 or so days ago, that he was in Gwanda and was shown with on a picture with the council, the Gwanda Town Council, saying all of them have defected, and it was good to use the word defected. because it's telling. You can only defect from your party to another party that's not yours. How can they defect? If they've defected, it's the party they are defecting from, which should deal with all of them and replace them. So there is a fundamental problem here. And in the end, everyone, I think, every rational person is asking, for how long will the people of Zimbabwe tolerate this? For how long will they treat journalists who will expose this, explain this in the way they treated Hopewell, Chinono, and Jacob Ngarivume, but especially Hopewell as a journalist? For how long? Will they do that to every journalist? Will they do what they are doing to Sophie Mukoena for reporting the Zimbabwean story? For how long? The fact is, no one really who expected a new dispensation after Mugabe thought that this thing will happen. The only thing is that the Guguraundis, the people responsible for violence, abductions, torture since 1980, with some going, some dying, some remaining, but all of them coalescing around Emerson Mnangagwa, are the ones, and they have no other option. Policy. Look at how Mugabe and the Reserve Bank have shamelessly abandoned all policy thinking to implement public law and order as economic policy. Use law and order against EcoCash, against Old Mutual, against vendors, and in the process destroying livelihoods, not through economic policy, but law and order. I think that retired Stalinists from Eastern Europe are looking with envy at this to say, wow, maybe we should have done this. It could have served the Soviet Union, and so forth. It's unheard of. It is outrageous that you can have a society based on law and order. Law and order is for the benefit of the community, not to punish the community, not to visit the sort of experience that people thought would die with the exit of the former president, whose first anniversary of his passing when we are remembering today.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Professor, for your time. This was a very informative live chat. Thank you so much for your time. But obviously, before I let you go, for you, what is your next move? Are you planning to start a political party? What does the future hold for you? Any plans?
Well, I don't know why you're asking me a pregnant question with a suggestion whether I'm planning to form a political party. If I'm doing anything, I said in the course of our discussion that every Zimbabwean is entitled to all the rights that are in the Bill of Rights, every Zimbabwean, including their political rights, and only those and each can show us or action through their freedom of expression, how they are exercising these rights. For me, my first calling is in the classroom.
Teaching.
I've said many times, yes, and research, especially the research side, for me. And when I came into politics, and I did not become an academic or a scholar by through appointment of the Politburo or anyone. It was through sitting behind the desk for 10 years. Behind the desk. Then I ended up in front of the desk. That's my calling. And when I came into public life, I hear a lot of stories, which, if true, would make me one of the richest people and so forth. I really tried my best to do things for my community. I tried. And I'm actually proud of what I did. And the only people I listen to when it comes to community representation are the people in Cholocho and because I specifically represented them. I don't listen to any other nonsense. I have never wanted to form any political party, to lead a political party. I am not right now working with any G40 thing and so forth, but I respect my colleagues, the former ministers I worked with very closely. I have nothing but respect for Xavier Kasukwere. I have nothing but respect for Patrick Joao. I have nothing but respect for Walter Mzembe. I have nothing but respect for all these others who are not as close in terms of daily interaction as these that I have mentioned. I have, and I know that everyone was trying very, very hard. I regret, I tweeted this morning that the failure, in my view, the major failure of President Mugabe, in his own respect, not necessarily in the respect of everyone, in the respect of society, in his own respect. Therefore, in terms of his own legacy, from his own point of view, going forward and so forth, an issue which political scientists and other social scientists and so forth will continue to research, is that he failed to come up with his succession. He did not have a succession plan. Mandela did not fail on this score. Mandela had an instructive succession plan. Nyerere had an instructive succession plan. He worked within his party, he was very clear, planned and so forth, and did not allow for events to take over and dictate the situation. In President Mugabe's case, I can't imagine, I don't understand, and I'm frustrated by the fact that he was in power for 38 years without a succession plan. If you look at the affidavits that Mnangagwa submitted in court to strangely undo his dismissal and to get the court to say his dismissal, to say he had no profit and all that stuff was illegal, he put his essential claim was that President Mugabe had lost. He was no longer being controlled by the people who were alleged to be surrounding the president. Mnangagwa says that in his affidavit. And in more specific ways, Mnangagwa and his people say Mugabe was now sleeping in Politburo meetings, in cabinet, and so forth. And this is one of the reasons they felt that they must intervene through the army because there was a subversion of the constitution. His wife, who did not have constitutional authority, was now using the fact that the husband had lost full control of his faculty to do this and that and so forth. That's what they alleged. That pains me. That pains me. It's an interpretation which is based on facts that cannot be denied. But the jury is out as to who actually took advantage of the president's diminished mental capacity due to age. My view, my prayer, which I just could not do anything about, was that President Mugabe, regardless of all these other issues that citizens had and in fact did have about him, he should have been in charge of his succession much earlier and made sure that his successor takes over. He was still fully in charge to enjoy his life post-office. He really needed to do that. And there's no way history will fail to note that he didn't do that. And the consequences of that started in 2008. By 2008, coming up to the 2010 coup, President Mugabe was a prisoner of forces beyond his control. And he let his succession to run its own course. And The people who are best positioned to take over or take advantage of a succession process, which by definition should be political, legal, and constitutional. The people who are often best positioned to take over a succession process that has lost its way are securocrats in any environment. The politicians lose out and the gun succeeds in a situation like that. They will either come guns blazing blatantly, or they will kidnap people, poison people, what is this? And that's why statesmen foresee that and they manage their succession. President Mugabe should have been succeeded at the last moment for his succession in 2008. Most desirable was 2002. But real last was 2008. Forward there, he had lost. It was left till late, and it has these consequences. So instead of moving, because he lost it, he did not have Mbeki to succeed Mandela. He was overtaken by events. And it was not only to his detriment in terms of his legacy, but to the disaster in terms of the country. The country, 40 years after, it should not be this. Zimbabwe should be a shining beacon now, and it should be united. Mnangagwa has divided his party, divided the government, divided the country in unprecedented ways at the 11th hour of transformation. And this is painful, and it is built in such a way that the transition that could have been has slipped away from the hands of Zimbabweans. It is now inevitable that the South Africans will come, and they will come as they are coming on Tuesday as the ANC, but they will also come as the South African government. And they must come, and through them, perhaps a new SADC approach will emerge to the Zimbabwean question, which is not GPA-like. Perhaps this time it will be the African Union, or better still, a fact-finding mission by the United Nations, unlike the GPA, which was based on the so-called. This one must also be based on a fact-finding international judicial process, so that everything is put on the table. Not like that GPA. It must not be a consensus of political interest. Society's ills, the consequences of cohesive authority, the brutality that now has been revived, institutionalized when everyone expected it to go, can only come to the table if there is a fact-finding mission that will allow civil society, the churches, the professionals, the workers, the vendors, the communicators, the arts, media, academia, the students, to be somehow through an organized process, speak out. It can no longer be just, let us have another political settlement. It is a societal assessment. There are things that must be confronted, which are very ugly about Zimbabwe, which might and will affect individuals in ugly ways. It's no longer possible to avoid those things. We could have dealt with them in the past. We did not deal with them in the past. They have produced this situation because they've not been dealt with in the past. And now is the moment. We can't be a society where you have a constitutional court justice who says the ZDF, the army, is the custodian of the constitution. We cannot be the only society in SADC that says that. We cannot be the only society where the country's national electoral body, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, is run by the army, and where the army creates companies like Africom who run the computers of ZEC, and they manipulate these computers. And where it is not possible to discuss this intelligently, if you do, you are stigmatized, denounced, dehumanized, and the debate ends about you. You become the focus of the discussion, not what you are saying. We cannot be the only society in SADC doing that, especially when we have claimed to be the most educated or to have the highest literate. We can't continue to be like that.
Okay. Thank you so much, Professor, for your time. I really enjoyed this live chat. It was very informative. We just hope that everything goes well in Zimbabwe. And all of our viewers that were listening to us today have learned one or two things from everything that you say. So thank you so much.
You're most welcome. Thank you for inviting me and giving me this opportunity.
No problem. Take care, Professor.
Thank you. Goodbye.